It all started with a letter. A simple, crisp envelope slid into my mailbox one Tuesday afternoon. I didn't think much of it at first. Just another piece of mail from the Homeowners Association, HOA. But when I opened it, my stomach dropped. The letter demanded that I hand over a key to my private lakefront garage gate. Their reason? Community access. I read it twice, then a third time, trying to make sense of it. My garage gate was on my property, bought and paid for with my own money. Why would the HOA need access to it? I called the HOA office immediately. Jennifer, the board president, answered with her usual cold, clipped tone. "It's for the benefit of the community," she said, as if that explained everything. "We need access to the lakefront for maintenance and emergencies." "But it's my property," I argued. "You can't just demand a key to my gate." Jennifer's voice turned sharp. "The board has ways of making things very uncomfortable for difficult homeowners." I froze. "Are you threatening me? Because that's what it sounds like." She didn't respond. Instead, she hung up. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something felt off. Why were they so desperate for access to my gate? I thought about the lakefront, quiet, secluded, and rarely used by anyone but me. What were they really after? The next morning, I found another letter in my mailbox. This one was a formal notice. If I didn't comply within 7 days, I'd face daily fines. My heart raced. This wasn't just about a gate anymore. It felt personal. I decided to visit Grace, my elderly neighbor who had lived in the community for decades. Maybe she knew something. When I told her about the letters, her face turned pale. "Be careful," she whispered. "The HOA board, they're not what they seem. A few years ago, another homeowner refused to comply with one of their demands. He ended up losing his house." "What do you mean, he lost his house?" I asked, my voice trembling. Grace hesitated, then leaned in closer. "They framed him for something he didn't do. Forged documents, false accusations. They made his life a living hell until he had no choice but to leave." My mind raced. Was that what they were planning for me? I thanked Grace and went home, my hands shaking. I didn't know it yet, but this was just the beginning. The HOA wasn't just after my gate. They were after something much bigger. And I was about to uncover a secret that would change everything. The next few days were a blur. I tried to go about my normal routine, but the HOA's demands hung over me like a dark cloud. I started noticing little things: strange cars driving slowly past my house, neighbors avoiding eye contact, and even my mail seemed to arrive later than usual. It felt like I was being watched. I decided to dig deeper. I spent hours researching the HOA's bylaws, property records, and meeting minutes. At first, everything seemed normal, but then I found something odd, a series of financial reports from the last 5 years. The numbers didn't add up. There were large sums of money marked as community improvements, but I couldn't find any evidence of those improvements actually happening. I called Grace again. "Do you remember any big projects the HOA did in the last few years, like renovations or new facilities?" She thought for a moment. "Not really. They repainted the clubhouse once, but that's about it." My suspicion grew. If the money wasn't being spent on the community, where was it going? Then, one evening, I heard a noise outside. It was late, and the neighborhood was quiet. I peeked through the blinds and saw 2 figures near my garage gate. My heart pounded as I grabbed my phone and turned on the camera. I zoomed in and recognized one of them, Jennifer. She was with a man I didn't know, and they were trying to force the gate open. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Confront them? Before I could decide, they left. but I knew this wasn't over. The next morning, I went to the police station. I showed them the video and explained everything: the letters, the threats, the financial discrepancies. The officer listened carefully but said there wasn't enough evidence to take action. HOAs have a lot of power, he warned. Be careful. I left the station feeling defeated but determined. If the police couldn't help, I'd have to take matters into my own hands. That afternoon, I received another letter from the HOA. This one was even more aggressive. It accused me of violating community rules by obstructing access to common areas and threatened legal action if I didn't comply within 48 hours. I knew I couldn't back down. I started reaching out to other homeowners, asking if they'd experienced similar issues. At first, most were hesitant to talk, but then I met Mark, a retired accountant who lived a few streets over. I've been trying to get answers for years, he told me. The HOA's finances are a mess. I've asked for audits, but they always shut me down. Together, we decided to organize a meeting with other homeowners. We needed to expose what was really going on, but the HOA wasn't going to make it easy. The night before the meeting, my house was broken into. Nothing was stolen, but my office was ransacked. Files were scattered everywhere, and my computer was smashed. It was a clear message: back off or else. I was scared, but I was also angry. They thought they could intimidate me into silence, but they were wrong. The meeting was tense. About a dozen homeowners showed up, and I shared everything I'd discovered. The financial discrepancies, the break-in, the threats. It all came pouring out. By the end, everyone was furious. "We need to take this to the authorities," Mark said. "But we need solid proof." That's when Grace spoke up. "I might have something." She pulled out a folder filled with old documents. "I've been keeping these for years just in case." We spent hours going through the papers. And then we found it, a smoking gun. A series of emails between Jennifer and a local contractor, detailing how they'd falsified invoices to embezzle thousands of dollars from the HOA. It was the evidence we needed. But before we could act, Jennifer showed up at my door. "I know what you're doing," she said, her voice icy. "And I'm warning you, stop now or you'll regret it." I stood my ground. "Or what? You'll break into my house again, frame me for something I didn't do." She didn't answer. She just glared at me before walking away. I knew we were running out of time. The HOA was getting desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. But I also knew we were close to exposing the truth. Little did I know, the biggest twist was yet to come. The days following Jennifer's visit were tense. I couldn't shake the feeling that something big was about to happen. Mark, Grace, and I worked tirelessly to organize the evidence we had gathered. We knew we had to act fast before the HOA could cover their tracks or retaliate further. One evening, as I was going through the documents Grace had provided, I found something that made my blood run cold. Buried in the stack of papers was a handwritten note from a former HOA board member who had resigned abruptly a few years ago. The note was cryptic but chilling. "They're not just stealing money, they're hiding something at the lakefront. Be careful." I immediately called Mark and Grace. We met at my house late that night. The three of us huddled around the kitchen table. "What do you think they're hiding?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, "but it can't be good. We need to check it out." Mark hesitated. "If we go poking around the lakefront, they'll know we're onto them. It's too risky." "We don't have a choice," I argued. "If they're hiding something illegal, we need to find it before they destroy the evidence." After hours of debate, we finally agreed to investigate the lakefront. But we had to be careful. We decided to go early the next morning, before sunrise, when the neighborhood was still asleep. The next day, we met at the edge of the lakefront property. The gate was still locked, but I had the key. My hands shook as I unlocked it and we slipped inside. The area was eerily quiet, the only sound the soft lapping of water against the shore. We split up to cover more ground. Mark searched near the boathouse, Grace checked the dock, and I headed toward a cluster of trees near the water's edge. As I walked, I noticed something strange, a patch of ground that looked freshly disturbed. I knelt down and started digging with my hands. The soil was loose, and it didn't take long for me to uncover something solid. My heart raced as I pulled it out. A metal box, rusted but still intact. "Mark, Grace, over here," I called out, my voice barely above a whisper. They rushed over, and together we pried the box open. Inside were stacks of documents, photographs, and a USB drive. The documents were financial records, more evidence of embezzlement. But the photographs were what really shocked us. They showed Jennifer and several other board members meeting with a man we didn't recognize. He looked rough, like someone you'd see in a crime drama, not in our quiet suburban neighborhood. "Who is that?" Grace asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I don't know," I said, "but it doesn't look good." We plugged the USB drive into my laptop. It contained video files, security footage from the lakefront. The videos showed Jennifer and the same man unloading crates from a truck late at night and burying them near the lake. "What's in the crates?" Mark asked, his face pale. "I don't know," I said, "but we need to find out." We decided to dig where the footage showed the crates being buried. It took hours, but eventually we hit something solid. It was a large wooden crate, sealed tightly. We pried it open, and what we found inside made our blood run cold. The crate was filled with weapons, guns, ammunition, and even explosives. "This isn't just embezzlement," Mark said, his voice shaking. "This is something much bigger." We didn't know what to do. If we called the police, the HOA would know we were onto them. But if we didn't, we were putting ourselves and the entire community in danger. As we debated our next move, we heard a noise behind us. We turned around to see Jennifer and two men standing there, their faces hard and angry. "I warned you to stay out of this," Jennifer said, her voice cold. One of the men stepped forward, holding a gun. "You shouldn't have come here." My heart pounded as I realized we were in serious trouble. But before I could react, we heard sirens in the distance. The men looked panicked, and Jennifer's face turned pale. "What did you do?" she hissed at me. "Nothing," I said, my voice steady despite my fear. "But it looks like someone else did." The sirens grew louder, and within minutes, the lakefront was swarming with police cars. The officers quickly surrounded us, their guns drawn. "We received an anonymous tip about illegal activity here," one of the officers said. "Care to explain what's going on?" Jennifer tried to act innocent, but it was too late. The evidence was right there in front of us. The weapons, the documents, the photographs. The police arrested Jennifer and the two men on the spot. As they were taken away, I felt a mix of relief and disbelief. We had uncovered something much bigger than we ever imagined. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. Who had tipped off the police? And what else were the HOA hiding? The arrest of Jennifer and the two men sent shockwaves through the community. News spread fast, and by the next morning, the neighborhood was buzzing with rumors. People were angry, confused, and scared. How could something like this happen in our quiet suburban community? Mark, Grace, and I knew we had to act quickly. The police had taken the evidence we found, but we still had copies of the documents and photos. We decided to call an emergency meeting with the other homeowners to explain everything. The meeting was packed. People were standing in the aisles, their faces a mix of fear and anger. I stood at the front of the room, my hands trembling as I held the stack of documents. "I know this is hard to believe," I began, "but the HOA board has been involved in illegal activities for years. They've been embezzling money, hiding weapons, and working with dangerous people. We have the evidence to prove it." I passed around copies of the documents and photos, and the room erupted in chaos. People shouted questions, demanded answers, and some even accused me of making it all up. "Why should we believe you?" one man yelled. "You're just trying to cause trouble." Before I could respond, Grace stood up. "I've lived in this community for over 30 years, she said, her voice strong despite her age. "I've seen things I didn't want to believe, but this is real. If we don't do something now, it's only going to get worse." Her words silenced the room. People started to listen, and by the end of the meeting, we had formed a plan. We would take our evidence to the district attorney and demand a full investigation into the HOA. But as we left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I noticed a black SUV parked down the street, its windows tinted. It stayed there for hours, and I knew it wasn't a coincidence. That night, I got a call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "You think you're so clever," a voice said. It was deep and menacing, sending chills down my spine. "But you have no idea what you're dealing with. Back off, or you'll regret it." The line went dead before I could respond. I called Mark and Grace immediately. "They're threatening us," I said, my voice shaking. "We need to be careful." "We can't stop now," Mark said. "We're too close." The next morning, we went to the district attorney's office. We presented our evidence and explained everything that had happened. The DA listened carefully, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "This is bigger than we thought," he said finally. "We'll need to involve the FBI." I felt a mix of relief and fear. The FBI meant this was serious, but it also meant we were in even more danger. As we left the office, I noticed the black SUV again. It followed us for a few blocks before disappearing into traffic. That evening, I decided to dig deeper into the documents we had found. There had to be something we missed, something that would explain why the HOA was involved in such dangerous activities. As I sifted through the papers, I found a name I didn't recognize: Victor Russo. A quick internet search revealed that he was a known crime boss with ties to organized crime. My heart raced as I realized the implications. The HOA wasn't just embezzling money, they were laundering it for a criminal organization. I called Mark and Grace, and we met at my house again. "This is way bigger than we thought," I said, showing them what I'd found. "The HOA is working with organized crime. That's why they were hiding weapons. They're using the lakefront as a drop point." Grace looked terrified. "What do we do now?" "We keep going," Mark said. "We have to expose this no matter what." But as we talked, we heard a noise outside. We froze, listening intently. Then the sound of breaking glass. Someone was in the house. The sound of breaking glass sent a jolt of panic through me. Mark, Grace, and I exchanged terrified glances. Without a word, I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering our address and the situation to the dispatcher. Mark quietly picked up a heavy lamp from the side table, and Grace clutched her purse tightly, her knuckles white. We could hear footsteps downstairs, slow, deliberate, and menacing. My heart pounded in my chest as I motioned for Mark and Grace to follow me to the closet in the hallway. It was the only place to hide without being seen immediately. We slipped inside, leaving the door slightly ajar so we could hear what was happening. The footsteps grew louder, climbing the stairs. My breath came in shallow gasps, and I could feel Grace trembling beside me. The intruder paused at the top of the stairs, and then we heard a voice, a low, gruff voice that sent chills down my spine. "I know you're here," the man said. "You shouldn't have stuck your nose where it doesn't belong." I recognized the voice. It was the same man from the photographs, Victor Russo. He moved down the hallway, his footsteps heavy and deliberate. He stopped outside the closet, and I held my breath, praying he wouldn't open the door. But then, the sound of sirens cut through the silence. The man cursed under his breath, and we heard him running back down the stairs. A moment later, the front door slammed shut. We waited a few seconds before cautiously stepping out of the closet. The police arrived moments later, their guns drawn as they swept the house. They found a broken window in the kitchen and footprints in the mud outside, but Victor Russo was gone. The officers took our statements and promised to increase patrols in the area, but I knew it wasn't enough. Victor Russo wasn't going to stop, not until he silenced us for good. After the police left, Mark, Grace, and I sat in the living room, too shaken to speak. Finally, Mark broke the silence. "We can't stay here," he said. "It's not safe." "But where can we go?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "We need to get out of town," I said. "At least until the FBI can take over." We packed a few essentials and left that night, driving to a small motel on the outskirts of town. It wasn't much, but it was far enough away to feel safe. For now. The next morning, I received a call from the district attorney. "We've reviewed your evidence," he said. "This is a major case, and the FBI is taking over. They want to meet with you as soon as possible." I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this nightmare was finally coming to an end. We met with the FBI later that day at a secure location. The agents were professional and thorough, asking detailed questions about everything we had discovered. They confirmed that Victor Russo was a high-ranking member of a powerful crime syndicate, and that the HOA had been laundering money for them for years. "You've done a brave thing," one of the agents said, "but you need to understand this is dangerous. Russo isn't going to let this go easily." "What do we do now?" I asked. "We'll put you in protective custody until we can bring Russo and the rest of the HOA board to justice," the agent said. "It's the only way to keep you safe." We agreed, but as we left the meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still off. The FBI was taking over, but Victor Russo was still out there, and he had resources we couldn't even imagine. That night, as we settled into our motel rooms, I noticed a car parked outside. It was the same black SUV that had been following us before. My stomach churned as I realized we weren't as safe as we thought. I called Mark and Grace into my room and showed them the car. "They found us," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What do we do now?" Grace asked, her face pale. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "You can't hide forever." I felt a surge of anger and fear. We had come so far, but we were still in danger. And then, as I stared at the text, an idea began to form. "We need to fight back," I said. "We can't just wait for the FBI to save us. We need to take control of this situation." "How?" Mark asked. "We have evidence," I said. "We know where they're operating. If we can expose them publicly, they won't be able to hide anymore." It was a risky plan, but we were out of options. We spent the next few hours drafting a statement and compiling all the evidence we had. We sent it to every major news outlet we could think of, along with a detailed explanation of what was happening. By morning, the story was everywhere. News vans were parked outside the motel, and reporters were calling nonstop. The FBI was furious. They wanted to handle this quietly, but it was too late. The story had gone viral, and the public was demanding answers. Victor Russo and the HOA board were exposed, but I knew this wasn't over. Russo wasn't the type to go down without a fight. And then, as I was packing my things to move to a new safe house, I received another text. "You've made a big mistake." This time, I didn't feel fear. I felt determination. We had started this fight, and we were going to finish it, no matter what. The media frenzy was overwhelming. News outlets across the country were covering the story, and the pressure on law enforcement to act was immense. The FBI moved quickly, arresting several members of the HOA board and raiding properties linked to Victor Russo. But despite the arrests, I knew we weren't out of the woods yet. Russo was still at large, and his threats were becoming more brazen. A few days after the story broke, I received a package at the motel. It was delivered to the front desk with no return address. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single photograph, a picture of my house, with the words, "You can't run forever," scrawled across the back. I showed it to Mark and Grace, and we all agreed it was time to leave the motel. The FBI arranged for us to move to a safe house in a nearby city, but even there, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The safe house was a small, nondescript apartment in a quiet neighborhood. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but it felt more like a prison. We were cut off from the outside world, with no contact except for the FBI agents assigned to our case. One evening, as I was going through the evidence we had collected, I found something I hadn't noticed before. A small folded piece of paper tucked into the back of one of the folders. It was a handwritten list of names and dates along with dollar amounts. At the bottom of the list was a single word: payments. I called Mark and Grace over to look at it. "What do you think this is?" I asked. Mark studied the list carefully. "These look like payoffs," he said. "But to who and for what?" Grace pointed to one of the names. "I recognize this person. He's a city councilman." My heart sank. If the corruption went as high as the city council, this was even bigger than we thought. We immediately contacted the FBI agent handling our case, Agent Collins. She came to the safe house that night to collect the list. "This could be a breakthrough," she said. "If we can link these payments to specific individuals, we might be able to bring down the entire network." But as she left, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something. The list was important, but it didn't explain why Victor Russo was so desperate to keep us quiet. There had to be more. The next morning, I woke up to find another package at the door. This one was smaller, wrapped in plain brown paper. Inside was a USB drive. I plugged it into my laptop, and a video file popped up. It was security footage from the lakefront, but this time it showed something different. A group of men unloading crates from a truck and carrying them into a hidden underground bunker. "What is that?" Grace asked, her voice trembling. "I don't know," I said, "but we need to find out." We sent the footage to Agent Collins, but before she could respond, the power in the safe house went out. The room was plunged into darkness, and I felt a surge of panic. "What's happening?" Grace whispered. Before I could answer, we heard a noise outside, the sound of footsteps on the porch. Mark grabbed a flashlight and motioned for us to stay quiet. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was too dark to see who it was, but I could hear their breathing, slow and deliberate. Mark turned on the flashlight, and the beam of light revealed a man wearing a mask. He was holding a gun. "Where is it?" the man demanded, his voice low and menacing. "Where's what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The list," he said. "Give it to me, or this ends badly." I realized then that the list we had found was more important than we thought. It wasn't just evidence, it was the key to something much bigger. Before I could respond, the sound of sirens filled the air. The man cursed and ran out the door, disappearing into the night. The FBI arrived moments later, their flashlights cutting through the darkness. Agent Collins was with them, her face grim. "We need to move you again," she said. "It's not safe here." But as we packed our things, I couldn't stop thinking about the list and the footage. What were they hiding in that bunker? And why were they willing to kill to keep it secret? We moved to a new safe house, but I knew we couldn't keep running forever. We had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for the FBI to figure it out. I was going to find out what was in that bunker myself. It was a dangerous plan, but I didn't see any other choice. The new safe house was even more isolated than the last. A cabin deep in the woods, miles from the nearest town. It felt like we were in the middle of nowhere, but at least it was quiet. The FBI had increased security, with agents stationed around the perimeter, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. I spent the next few days going over everything we had. The list, the footage, the documents. There had to be something we were missing. Some clue that would explain why Victor Russo and the HOA were so desperate to keep us quiet. Then, late one night I found it. Buried in the stack of documents was a map of the lakefront property. At first glance, it looked like a standard survey map, but when I held it up to the light, I noticed something strange. A series of faint lines and symbols that didn't match the rest of the map. I called Mark and Grace over to look at it. "What do you think this is?" I asked, pointing to the symbols. Mark studied the map carefully. "It looks like some kind of code," he said. "Maybe coordinates?" Grace grabbed a notebook and started scribbling down the symbols, trying to make sense of them. After a few minutes, she looked up, her eyes wide. "I think I've got it," she said. "These symbols correspond to numbers. If we plot them on the map, they might lead us to something." We spent the next hour decoding the symbols and plotting the coordinates. When we were done, the map revealed a hidden location, a spot deep in the woods, far from the lakefront. "What do you think is there?" Grace asked. "I don't know," I said, "but we need to find out." The next morning, we told Agent Collins about the map. She was skeptical at first, but when we showed her the coordinates, she agreed to send a team to investigate. "Stay here," she said. "We'll let you know what we find." But as the hours passed, I grew more and more restless. I couldn't just sit around waiting. I needed to see for myself. That night, after Mark and Grace had gone to bed, I slipped out of the cabin. I knew it was risky, but I had to know what was out there. I followed the coordinates on the map, using a flashlight to navigate through the dense woods. It was slow going, and more than once I thought about turning back. But then, just as I was about to give up, I saw it. A small, hidden entrance built into the side of a hill. The entrance was covered by a heavy metal door, but it wasn't locked. I pushed it open and stepped inside, my heart pounding in my chest. The inside was dark and damp, with a narrow tunnel leading deeper into the hill. I followed the tunnel, my flashlight casting eerie shadows on the walls. After what felt like an eternity, the tunnel opened up into a large, underground chamber. The sight took my breath away. The chamber was filled with crates, dozens of them stacked from floor to ceiling. Some of the crates were open, revealing stacks of cash, gold bars, and what looked like drugs, but that wasn't the most shocking part. In the center of the chamber was a table covered with maps, blueprints, and documents. I picked up one of the documents and scanned it quickly. It was a plan. A detailed plan for a large-scale operation involving smuggling, money laundering, and even human trafficking. My hands shook as I realized what I was looking at. This wasn't just about the HOA or Victor Russo. This was part of something much bigger. a network that stretched far beyond our small community. I took out my phone and started taking pictures of everything. I knew I had to get this evidence to the FBI, but before I could leave, I heard a noise behind me. I turned around, my flashlight illuminating the figure standing in the entrance of the chamber. It was Victor Russo. "You just don't know when to quit, do you?" he said, his voice cold and menacing. I backed away, my heart racing. "It's over, Russo. The FBI knows everything." He laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "You think the FBI can stop this? You have no idea what you're dealing with." Before I could respond, he pulled out a gun and pointed it at me. "You've caused enough trouble," he said. "Time to end this." I closed my eyes, bracing myself for the worst. But then I heard a voice, a familiar voice. "Drop the gun, Russo." I opened my eyes to see Agent Collins and a team of FBI agents standing in the entrance, their guns trained on Russo. For a moment, no one moved. Then, with a curse, Russo dropped the gun and raised his hands. The agents moved in quickly, cuffing Russo and leading him away. Agent Collins turned to me, her expression a mix of relief and anger. "You shouldn't have come here," she said. "You could have gotten yourself killed." "I know," I said, "but I had to see for myself." She sighed, then nodded toward the chamber. "This is bigger than we thought. We're going to need your help to take it down." As we left the chamber, I felt a mix of emotions, relief, fear, and determination. We had uncovered something massive, but the fight wasn't over yet. And then, as we stepped outside, I noticed something strange. The woods were quiet, too quiet. "Something's wrong," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Agent Collins frowned. "What do you mean?" Before I could answer, a shot rang out, and one of the agents fell to the ground. "Get down!" Agent Collins shouted, pulling me behind a tree. The woods erupted in chaos as more shots were fired. I crouched behind the tree, my heart pounding as I realized what was happening. Russo wasn't working alone, and now his allies were here to finish what he started. The gunfire was relentless. Bullets whizzed past us, tearing through the trees and sending splinters flying in every direction. Agent Collins barked orders into her radio, calling for backup, but it was clear we were outnumbered. "Stay down!" she shouted at me, her voice barely audible over the chaos. I pressed myself against the tree, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst out of my chest. Mark and Grace were back at the cabin. Were they safe? Had the attackers gone after them too? The FBI agents returned fire, but the shooters were well hidden in the dense woods. It was impossible to tell how many there were or where they were coming from. "We need to move!" Agent Collins yelled, grabbing my arm and pulling me to my feet. We ran, zigzagging through the trees as bullets tore through the underbrush around us. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like they might give out at any moment, but I kept going. Finally, we reached a small clearing where the FBI had set up a temporary command post. Agents were scrambling to secure the area, their faces tense and focused. "Get her out of here," Agent Collins ordered one of the agents. "No," I protested. "I'm not leaving without Mark and Grace. They're safe," she said firmly. "We've already evacuated them. Now go." The agent grabbed my arm and led me to a waiting SUV. I climbed in, my hands still shaking, and the vehicle sped away from the chaos. As we drove, I tried to make sense of what had just happened. Who were those shooters? Were they part of Russo's network, or was this something even bigger? The SUV took me to another safe house, a small, nondescript building in the middle of nowhere. Mark and Grace were already there, looking shaken but unharmed. "What happened?" Mark asked as soon as I walked in. "It was an ambush," I said, collapsing into a chair. "Russo's people, or whoever they are, they were waiting for us. Grace sat down beside me, her face pale. "This is getting too dangerous. We can't keep doing this." "We don't have a choice," I said. "We're in too deep now." The next few days were a blur. The FBI kept us updated on the investigation, but it was clear they were struggling to keep up. The network we had uncovered was massive, with ties to organized crime, corrupt officials, and even international smuggling rings. Then, one evening, Agent Collins came to the safe house with news. "We've identified some of the shooters," she said. "They're mercenaries, hired guns with no direct ties to Russo. That means someone else is pulling the strings." "Who?" I asked. She hesitated, then handed me a file. Inside was a photograph of a man I didn't recognize. Tall, with sharp features and cold, calculating eyes. "His name is Alexander Kane," she said. "He's a high-level operative with connections to multiple crime syndicates. We believe he's the one behind all of this." I stared at the photograph, a chill running down my spine. This man wasn't just a criminal, he was a mastermind. "What do we do now?" Mark asked. "We keep digging," Agent Collins said. "But you need to understand, this is dangerous. Kane is ruthless, and he won't stop until he gets what he wants." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Kane and the network he controlled. We had uncovered so much, but it felt like we were only scratching the surface. Then, as I was going through the files Agent Collins had given us, I found something. A name I recognized. It was a city councilman, one of the names on the list we had found earlier. But this time, there was more. A detailed account of his involvement in the network, including meetings with Kane himself. I called Mark and Grace over to look at it. "This is it," I said. "This is the proof we need to take him down." But before we could do anything, the power went out. The room was plunged into darkness, and I felt a surge of panic. "What's happening?" Grace whispered. Before I could answer, we heard a noise outside, the sound of footsteps on the porch. Mark grabbed a flashlight and motioned for us to stay quiet. The door creaked open, and a figure stepped inside. It was too dark to see who it was, but I could hear their breathing, slow and deliberate. Mark turned on the flashlight, and the beam of light revealed a man wearing a mask. He was holding a gun. "Where is it?" the man demanded, his voice low and menacing. "Where's what?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "The evidence," he said. "Give it to me, or this ends badly." I realized then that we weren't just fighting for our lives. We were fighting for the truth. And no matter what happened, I wasn't going to let them win. The masked man stepped closer, his gun trained on us. My mind raced, trying to think of a way out. Mark held the flashlight steady, his hands trembling slightly, while Grace clutched my arm, her breath coming in shallow gasps. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at my chest. The man laughed, a cold, humorless sound. "Don't play dumb. We know you have it. Hand it over, and maybe we'll let you live." I glanced at Mark, who gave me a barely perceptible nod. We had hidden copies of the evidence in multiple places, but the original files were in a locked drawer in the safe house. If this man was here for them, it meant someone had tipped him off. "Okay," I said slowly, raising my hands. "I'll get it for you, just don't hurt us." The man gestured with his gun. "Move, slowly." I walked toward the drawer, my mind racing. If I gave him the files, we'd lose our only leverage. But if I didn't, we might not make it out of this alive. As I reached for the drawer, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A small, blinking red light on the security panel by the door. The safe house was equipped with a silent alarm, and it had been triggered. Help was on the way, but we had to buy time. I opened the drawer and pulled out the files, handing them to the man. He snatched them from me, his eyes gleaming with triumph. "Smart move," he said, backing toward the door. "But just to be safe." He raised his gun again, and my heart stopped. But before he could pull the trigger, the door burst open, and a team of FBI agents stormed in, their guns drawn. "Drop it!" Agent Collins shouted, her voice cutting through the tension like a knife. The man hesitated for a split second, then dropped the files and raised his hands. The agents moved in quickly, cuffing him and pulling off his mask. I didn't recognize him, but the look in his eyes sent a chill down my spine. "You're too late," he sneered as they led him away. "This isn't over." Agent Collins turned to us, her face grim. "Are you okay?" I nodded, still shaking. "We're fine, but he's right, this isn't over. They're not going to stop." "We know," she said, "but we're closer than ever. We've identified Alexander Kane's location, and we're moving in tonight." "What about us?" Mark asked. "You're coming with me," she said. "We need you to identify Kane and any other key players, but I won't lie, it's dangerous. If you're not up for it, we'll arrange for you to go into hiding." I looked at Mark and Grace. We had come this far. We couldn't back down now. "We're in," I said. Agent Collins nodded. "Then let's move." We were taken to a secure location where the FBI was preparing for the raid. The atmosphere was tense, with agents moving quickly and quietly, their faces set in determined lines. As we waited, I couldn't stop thinking about the masked man's words. This isn't over. What did he mean? Was Kane expecting us? Or was there something else we were missing? Finally, Agent Collins came over to brief us. "We're moving in on Kane's compound in an hour," she said. "It's heavily guarded, but we have the element of surprise. Once we're inside, we'll need you to identify Kane and any other key players." "What if he's not there?" Grace asked. "Then we'll keep looking," Agent Collins said. "But we have reason to believe he's there. This is our best shot." As the team prepared to move out, I noticed something strange. A folder on a nearby table with my name on it. I picked it up and flipped through it, my heart sinking as I realized what it was. It was a list of names, people who had been targeted by Kane's network. And at the top of the list was my name, along with Mark's and Grace's. "Agent Collins," I said, holding up the folder. "What is this?" She glanced at it, her expression darkening. "That's a list of potential targets. Kane's network has been monitoring you for weeks. They know everything about you, your routines, your habits, your weaknesses." "Why didn't you tell us?" Mark asked, his voice rising. "We didn't want to alarm you," she said. "But now that we're moving in, you need to know the stakes." I felt a surge of anger and fear. We had been in even more danger than we realized, and the FBI had kept it from us. But there was no time to dwell on it. The team was ready to move, and we had a job to do. As we climbed into the armored vehicles, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. The convoy moved swiftly through the night, the headlights cutting through the darkness as we approached Kane's compound. It was a sprawling estate, surrounded by high walls and guarded by armed men. From the outside, it looked like a fortress. Agent Collins briefed us one last time as the team prepared to breach the compound. "Stay close to me," she said. "Once we're inside, we'll need you to identify Kane and any other key players. But if things go south, get out. Your safety is the priority." I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. This was it, the moment we had been working toward for weeks. But as I looked at Mark and Grace, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was too easy. Kane was a mastermind. Would he really let the FBI walk right into his stronghold? The breach was swift and precise. The FBI team moved in like a well-oiled machine. taking down guards and securing the perimeter within minutes. We followed Agent Collins into the main building, the air thick with tension. The interior was opulent, with marble floors and expensive artwork lining the walls. But there was no sign of Kane, or anyone for that matter. The place was eerily quiet. "Where is everyone?" Mark whispered. "I don't know," I said, my unease growing. We moved deeper into the compound room by room, but it was empty. It was as if Kane had vanished into thin air. Then, we reached a large, ornate door at the end of a hallway. Agent Collins signaled for the team to stop, then turned to us. "This is it," she said. "If Kane's here, he's behind that door." The team prepared to breach, but before they could, the door swung open on its own. A voice echoed from inside, cold, calm, and dripping with menace. "Come in," the voice said. "I've been expecting you." We stepped inside, and there he was, Alexander Kane. He was seated at a large desk, his hands folded neatly in front of him. He looked calm, almost bored, as if our presence was nothing more than a minor inconvenience. "You've caused me a great deal of trouble," he said, his eyes locking onto mine. "But I must admit I'm impressed. Few people have ever gotten this close." "It's over, Kane," Agent Collins said, her gun trained on him. "You're under arrest." Kane smiled, a slow, chilling smile that sent a shiver down my spine. "Is that so?" Before anyone could react, the lights went out, plunging the room into darkness. Shouts and gunfire erupted as the FBI team scrambled to regain control. I felt someone grab my arm and pull me to the ground. "Stay down," Mark hissed. The chaos lasted only a few seconds before the lights came back on. When they did, Kane was gone. The room was empty, save for a single piece of paper on the desk. Agent Collins picked it up, her face pale. "It's a list," she said. "Names of people he's targeting next." I took the list, my hands trembling as I read it. At the top were the names of high-ranking officials, law enforcement officers, and even a few journalists. And at the bottom, in bold letters, was a message. "This is just the beginning." The raid was a failure. Kane had escaped, and we were left with nothing but a warning. But as we left the compound, I realized something. We had exposed his network. The evidence we had gathered was enough to bring down dozens of his operatives, and the public was now aware of the danger he posed. It wasn't the victory we had hoped for, but it was a start. Moral lesson. This story is a reminder that standing up for what's right is never easy, but it's always worth it. Corruption and injustice thrive in silence, but they can't survive the light of truth. Even when the odds seem impossible, even when the fight feels too big, one voice can make a difference. We learned that courage isn't the absence of fear, it's taking action despite it. And while the battle may not always end in a clean victory, every step forward is a step toward justice. So, if you ever find yourself facing a system that seems too powerful to challenge, remember this: the truth is your greatest weapon, and your voice is stronger than you think.